Okay, we're also live streaming, so welcome to those who are joining us on the live stream. Also for those who have supported the work and keeping the India mission in your hearts, thank you so much, and God bless you for your hearts. So we by God's amazing grace, our church is very aware that we are so thankful and so privileged that God has allowed us to be part of this work in India. And we'll start with the question of how did it all begin, that we ended up having what there is today, a wonderful mission, an orphanage, 18 churches, a ministry to the Leper Colony, etc. And it's growing and it's thriving, and it's amazing to see what God has done there. And every story has a beginning. How did it all begin? Jeff would have loved to have been here to share this, but we've heard the story together from David many times, and it's wonderful for him to tell the story. This is a picture of David. This is a recent picture of his, when, of course, the church first met him was in 2007. But this is a recent picture of him. And the story goes something like this. As a young boy growing up in a Christian village called Guma, which we've been to, he told me he used to look at the planes that were flying over, and in his heart as a Christian, he had a dream and a prayer that one day he'd be able to go to England, the great Christian nation of England. And he would look at the planes and he would write with a stick the word England in the dirt in his village, and that was a prayer. He would have to wait 14 years plus until that prayer was finally answered. But he finished school and he went to train to be a minister or an evangelist in a Bible college in Mumbai. And while he was studying there, his heart grew with a desire to be able to help the orphans and maybe to run an orphanage in his home state of Odisha. After he finished college, he was inducted as a pastor, and he worked at a children's home for a while. And then, without any help from anyone else, he moved back to Odisha. He rented a house and he began the work. Began to bring orphans in, and they'd just be sleeping on the floor in this house. One day, David was sitting reading his Bible in Calcutta train station, sitting on a wall, and this older English lady, her name was Sybil Berry, a Christian lady, was visiting India. She saw him and she said, "Are you a Christian?" And he looked up, and it was the first time he'd ever met or spoken to a foreigner before. And he said, "Yes, I am a Christian." They began to speak. He shared his heart for the work, and she said, "Can I come and see the children?" She's from Eastbourne. And she went and saw the work and began to support the work and be an encouragement. One day in 2007, from here, she asked David, "Would you like to come to England? There's a youth conference happening over in Eastbourne, and I could arrange for you to come." So David couldn't believe it. And of course, he came over to England. And while he was in Eastbourne, he decided he wanted to visit Brighton, so he got on the bus. He was going along this South Coast road, and he saw this church, and his heart leapt. And he says, I want to go to that church. And he called the church, and he says, "Can I come to your service on Sunday?" And of course, we said, "Yes, of course." And he arrived on the Sunday. He was in the service, and afterwards he began to speak to the leaders, to Ian, to Jeff, and to Richard, and began to tell them his story. An amazing story as it was. And they hid that in their hearts. And when he returned to India, he would continue to communicate with them, and he would plead with them and say, "Come and see. Come to India. Come and see." And for me, perhaps the most remarkable part of the story is this, for me, that Richard and Jeff did that. It's amazing. These precious men, by faith, they had just retired, and they looked at each other and prayerfully they thought, "Well, listen, we'll never know unless we go." So they did that. They got on a plane. They thought, "Let's go see the sights." They went with their own money. "Let's see the sights, and afterwards let's go and visit David And they did that. And of course, this is where the history unfolds with the work in India, because what they saw really changed their lives and put something in their heart. And when they came back, of course, they imparted that to the church, and the church has been on board all these years with prayers and unbelievable support and seeing the work grow. That initial trip of Richard and Jeff, as they pioneered by faith, has borne so much fruit. And this fruit is people's lives. And we see God's hand in this connection. We see God's hand in the fact that he led David to work with orphans, that he met that woman at the train station, that she brought him to England, that he came to this church, that Richard and Jeff found the faith and the courage to go to India. And it's a remote part of India. They were on there, they were seeing the sights, and then all of a sudden you go to the remotest part of rural India, and nothing quite prepares you for it. And they went there, and when they saw it, God moved. And God's hand of providence has been through it all. So I'd like to ask, Richard's going to come up, and he's going to share some of those first trips and early years. So Richard, come on up.
Well, you'll have to bear with me because I'm not very good with technology and I'm bound to mess it up, so but we'll sort it out. So in 2008, Jeff and I boarded a plane at Heathrow and landed in Delhi, I think was the first one we went to. And immediately we were immersed straight away into the detail of traditional Indian culture. And where am I pointing this? Up there? There it is. The sound of flipping burgers and the smell of frying chips. But we were met by David and HK, not at Delhi, but at a place called Visakhapatnam, which is a regional airport down near where they live. And we went into a hotel and what have you, but then we started travelling around the villages. And they're all pretty much of a muchness. They're pretty much like that, really. They have thatched roofs, hard floors to sleep on, one water pump for the whole village, where they go and do everything, their washing and their ablutions and goodness knows what else. But they really are lovely people, and they were so happy to see us. And if I could just add something into what Graham said about David had been praying to go to England. Well, when we got there and went to Guma, which is David's home village, met his mum and his dad had been praying for white missionaries to come to his village for 25 years. And he was so overjoyed to see us, I can tell you that. He really was at peace with it, and in fact, before we had a second visit, he died. But he died in peace, knowing that his prayers had been answered. That's the equivalent of the motorway services in India. Not the most healthy of places, but there you go. And to get a cup of tea without sugar in it is a real struggle. The first of the villages we went to was a place called Hajaradang. And these are the people there. You always, always, always get the marigold garlands. Wherever you go, you can collect them. And they smell, and they've got insects in them, and they irritate. But you've got to accept them in good faith. But they really are lovely people. They made us very, very welcome. This was a village with just a few Christians in it. And they lived peaceably with the Hindus, which is not always the case in India. But as time went on, the whole village converted to Christianity because they saw the fellowship and the relationship that we had with them. In that village, they had a church, and at election time, for some reason, the political elections, the Hindus tend to get rather agitated. and they go around and destroy what was a Christian church. I don't see how they're going to achieve anything by that, but they do it. And that was just part of the persecution that the Christians in this area suffer from almost on a daily basis, but it goes up and down in intensity. It's a different village, but as I say, they're all pretty similar. This young lady came to us in a village called Hukumba, and we were having a little gathering out in the open, and her dad brought that bed across for her and then carried her across and laid her on it. And apparently she'd been playing in the jungle and fallen out of a tree and broken her leg, and the local, let's call him a witch doctor, tried to repair it with bamboo and mud splints, and that hadn't worked. So with no anaesthetics or anything else, they'd broken it again and tried it for a second time. But even that didn't work, and she was crippled for life, and that touched me for some reason. Well, it would touch anybody, I think. What a pretty little girl. But I just couldn't get her out of my head when we got back. And weeks later, I had to say to Jeff, what can we do for this girl? And we found out how much the operation would cost. It was about 250 quid. I was willing to pay that myself, but I didn't have to because the church contributed very generously to it. And she went into hospital, had her leg sorted out under anaesthetic. I think she was in there about 3 weeks. And then she had to take things steadily. And I bought her calcium supplements for her diet because they have a deficiency out there and a tendency to break bones. And she's now 18 years old, she's attending college, she's doing an engineering course, and she is a very, very pretty girl. And that's her. So that was a real, real blessing for me. Certainly was. Wherever we went, we had to do baptisms, and some of the places we did it were questionable, shall we say, in the least. When we go to places like this, that's just a little lake that they use for washing and doing their laundry and all that sort of stuff. But before we went in there, David started throwing rocks and sticks in there. We asked him what he was doing, and he said, well, we just don't want any snakes around while we're in there. And there were mosquito larvae floating around on the surface of the water. You could see it all the time, you know. But we baptised many, many people while we were out there. And in fact, I was baptised myself out there in a river called the Jolta. Then we went on to the children's home, and that was the home that we found them in. Now, the owners of it lived on the top floor, and on the ground floor were two large-ish rooms, one for the boys, one for the girls. And out the back, they had one toilet between the lot of them. And at this stage, we were talking about over 40 kids, plus their carers. And it was disgusting. But there was little we could do about it. That little shack on the right is the kitchen, where they prepared all the food for 40-plus kids. They did a special meal while we were there, and they killed a chicken, which was something special, because they probably got meat about once a week if they were lucky, but they killed this chicken and curried it up. It's always chicken curry wherever you go. It's chicken curry, believe me. That's a little side shack where they store their goods. These kids have few belongings. In fact, they got a little box each, a metal box, which is about the size of a battery drill case. And in there are all their worldly belongings, everything they've got, everything they own. This is them eating, and you can see great piles of rice, and generally most of their meals is just boiled rice and dal. Occasionally, if David had the funds, he would buy something to go in it. Eat a lot of eggs with their curry, but it's a very, very boring diet. And they need those large quantities of rice to get the carbohydrates for their daily work and what have you. So, but they're all very, very well mannered, very well disciplined. And there's the garlands waiting to go round your neck. They did a little enactment for us, and this was them carrying a body in that Jesus then raised, and they did that enactment for us. It was very, very touching. We then went on, not on the first trip, but on the second trip, to buy some land, because having seen where they were living, we couldn't leave them in that. So we had a big fundraising effort, and that was a development site that was being offered for sale, and we went and bought 12 plots on it, and that's HK, and I can't see who the other one is, measuring up just to see that what we were going to build would fit in there. We then went on to the, I don't know what they call it, the land registry office to transfer the title of that land to us. And we had to pay by cash. Now the land was £3,000, and about 100 rupees to the pound makes it, does it make it 30,000? That makes it 300,000, doesn't it? And they wanted cash, and it was like 2 house bricks of banknotes. Had to carry them round. But we handed them over and it all went well. The transfer deed was written in Sanskrit, so we didn't have a clue what we were signing. But there you go. And then the following trip, we started the construction. And that white is the markings out of what's going where, and that's going to be one of the foundation pillars. And I'm having a little go at the ground, and I think Jeff's wondering if he could get my luggage allowance on the way back. We tried to take our kids to the beach every trip that we can. And the first time we were there, or not the first time we were there, but the first trip we had, we went, and none of them had ever seen the sea before. And they were absolutely amazed when they saw it, its immensity and its beauty. They just couldn't wait to get in there. They had to be halted on those steps there to get themselves ready. And then they were told to go, and off they went, and had the time of their lives. They really did. The guy out in the water, they put out there just in case any of them got washed away, and he could catch them as they went past. And then we had a meal afterwards. They did. And that's the kitchen. Went on to a leper colony, and I'm not going to say much about this because Lisa's coming up to talk about it at length later on. But they were absolutely astounded that we were even prepared to go into their compound, let alone touch them and talk to them in close proximity. They were lovely people, but really, really ostracised from their society, totally ostracised. Nobody would have anything to do with them. They would go around begging, and if people felt sorry for them, they might throw a few coins on the ground, but of course with leprosy, when it's taken your fingers, you can't pick them up. So the kids would come and nick them, and their day's effort would be for nothing. But they were great people, and most of those ones you see in those 2 pictures are dead now. That fellow certainly is. They don't live long with the extra poor diet that they have and the lack of medical treatment, which has improved, I must say, over the years. But their accommodation was pitiful. That's the sort of conditions that they were living in. That has now improved, but I'll let Lisa talk about that. And there they are meeting with us. And as I say, they were just absolutely amazed that we would even go in there, because nobody else would. And that's now over to the good vicar.
Great, thank you so much. I remember on one trip when we went to the beach, the Bay of Bengal, in the Indian Ocean, just swimming, out with 55 Indian children, just thinking, how did this happen? It's incredible to be over there. So our last trip was in 2020, just before the pandemic, of course, so we haven't had an Indian night since then. So some of these pictures, many of you wouldn't have seen, so we'll run through these. Ian was able to come on his first trip. It was my third trip, and Jeff, I think, has lost count at this point. And that was the trip in 2020. You have to rent a 4x4 because of some of the roads, if you can call them that, are just impassable otherwise. And we come down to Paralacamundi, which is a town of about 80,000. It's a town that kind of serves all of the other towns and villages that rise up to into the mountains, into the Saura Hills. If you want to sell anything or get supplies or whatever, that's the center. And everywhere you look, there are sights and smells and sounds that just catch you, and you can't believe what you're seeing again and again. It's quite a cultural experience to go there. All different kinds of transport and people selling their wares, moving things into town to sell. This, unfortunately, is a very common sight. This is just as you come out of our hotel door. That's what you see every morning as we would venture on into the day. It's very unfortunate. People, I'm not sure how good that is for the guy's neck, but that's what they're doing, carrying their wares to the next village or to Paralacamundi to sell. And you see, when you see these ladies in hard labor in the fields or carrying things, they always look beautiful, dressed in the most colourful saris. But there you are, carrying the woods in the villages there. They're washing their clothes on the banks of the river. Very common sight. There's probably about 30 people in and on that little van. And that's a typical traffic jam that you might see on the road that leads to the home. And if you follow this road up, you'll be driving along the road, and all of a sudden, on the right-hand side, this big, bright, beautiful building would come into view, which we call the Home of Life. It's the reason it's green and pink and orange is because the children were given the opportunity to choose the colors. And it's the brightest thing you can see around there for ages. So from those pictures of measuring those lines that Richard showed us, this is what's there today. It's quite an amazing building. Of course, it always needs to be modernized. There's always so much more you could do with it. It could probably handle maybe up to 200 orphans, 150 orphans. At the moment, we got 55 in there. The budget is part of that. But nevertheless, this home of life provides for them physically and emotionally, and of course spiritually as well. All of the team there, volunteers, are amazing Christians who pray and serve. They sleep at the home, they live at the home with these kids. Their lives are given to the work. And when you arrive, and Richard and Ian didn't prepare me for this, or Richard and Jeff didn't prepare me, or for Ian either, when you arrive, you are overwhelmed at the welcome you get, the love that comes out of these children, the joy, the hugs. It's really overwhelming. They love you in the fullest sense. They are so thankful for. They're aware that they've received so much because of this church and others that have supported and given to the work. So that's the team. David in the middle with his signature hat. We normally take him a different color each trip. And on the right is Raul, another worker. The two in the front is Cookie, that's her nickname, and Esau. They're married, they work in the kitchen. And then on the other side is Michael, who is David's younger brother. And actually, while we were there, Michael and Cooney got married. And we got to attend the Indian wedding while we were out there. That was such a joy and a celebration. So they make up the team. These children are new since our trip before. So now there's a turnover in the home. There's younger kids or more kids coming in, and the older kids are now going on to college. Many of them are going on to Bible college and things like that, want to work in the ministry. And when we're there every morning and every evening, we have a meeting with the children. We'll do a Bible message or Bible story. If I had a guitar, I would teach them some songs, and they would learn English that way. It was really, really fun. And then, of course, I would use sketchboard evangelism. I don't know if you know that tool, but effectively you take a Bible verse or Bible story and you wrap a pictorial story around it, and the kids are glued to that, and they can listen for hours on end. For example, that one is from Luke 15. We would just find out what the words were in Odia, their native language. This is the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son, the lost sinner from Luke 15, and you put the letters in as you go, and it keeps them following in the story. It's very effective. This is Rahel. Maybe you remember her from the last picture. She stole our hearts, but as all the children do. But she is beautiful. She was 5 when she came into the orphanage, and at the time, her and another little boy were the youngest in the home at 5. And they both lost their parents from different families. They both lost their parents in one of the hurricanes, wasn't it, that they had or something? I forget the exact story. Yeah. But when you hear the stories of these children, they will tell you, you know, one boy told us, I remember the tears rolling down his face, telling us that he lost his parents in a mudslide when they were out there. Another one in a motor accident, which is so common over there. And if you see how they drive, you understand there's no markings in the roads. There's no traffic lights. It's just madness. And sometimes you see a whole family of 4 on a motorbike. The woman's carrying a newborn baby, and then another motorbike guy's carrying a goat straddled over the bizarre. So there's accidents and unbelievable stories these children have got. And when they begin to tell them, you break. But the consolation is the home of life, which has brought hope and security to so many of these precious children. And of course, they love to sing as well. And something like this. Just a little taste for you. Marev, this young man loves the Bible. They're all such wonderful believers, disciples, questions, faith. To watch them pray in the meetings is just moves your heart. It's amazing. This is the bracelets we did with them when we first went over there, the gospel bracelets. This is in the kitchen, Cookie making rice. As we heard, rice is in every meal. There they are. Lining up for their meals, the boys with their dishes, getting their food all cooked at the home, of course. And there's Ian getting in on the action as well. I think he cut in line, if I remember correctly, on that. And these are some of the older teenagers. You got Marshall, and Brooklyn is the nickname I gave him because he had a Brooklyn T-shirt. Abraham. Oh, these are amazing. Oh, these boys, such pure hearts. You just love them so much. These 3 girls, someone in the church actually heard of the need and supported them to go on to Bible college. And here is Jeff giving them the envelope, telling them, here's the money, you can now go on to Bible college. And they were so blessed by that. And on that same trip, Ian and I went up with David. When you do baptisms, because that's quite sensitive over there in the strict Hindu culture, you have to go. We will go a couple of hours up into the mountains to this remote little river to baptize them. And these 3 girls got baptized before they went to Bible college. We went up there for another baptism. There, Jeff came with us on that time. And these 2 girls in the front in the white then also got baptized. The one in the full white, Navtani, I think her name is. And she, when we were up there getting baptized, she sang. David said, oh, she has a beautiful voice. She could sing us a song. I think she's 15, something like that. And she sang for us on the banks of the river.
প্রিয় পিতা ঈশ্বর দয়া কল কৃপা কল দয়া কল কৃপা কল আম্ভকো প্রেম করিল.
And afterwards, David told us the lyrics to that song. It's just recognizing God's amazing grace that had found her and changed her life, and how thankful she was. That's what the lyrics to the song is. Amazing. There they are, dressed in their school uniform. They attend a state school for regular classes. It's about a 30-minute walk, effectively, through the jungle forest, which they have to make in the heat of the year, and in the rainy seasons. We really hope and pray that we can raise money to buy a van for the home, which would serve them so well. And there they are, heading off into the forest jungle. And one morning we thought, let's go with them. So we went with them. We took the journey, went to the school. They invited us into the classes. That's the language, by the way. That's what you have to. I don't know how do you fancy trying to learn that Odia? Incredible. And this picture was actually taken about 2 days ago. They just sent it over. Thank you so much. We are proud to be students of the Home of Life. Because at the Home of Life, there's a reinforcement they get in their studies, in their homework, and they're learning English, etc. slowly. There we're out on a trip, just sharing with the children. This is another trip we took in 2020 up to the waterfalls by a Hindu temple, a day trip. Again, we try and do a day trip with them every year. These are the four brothers. These are the Lima brothers. David, of course, his brother HK has a similar kind of ministry, a whole network of churches up in Calcutta, which we're yet to visit on one trip. We hope we can do that. That's his younger brother, Michael, who also is on the team, and his older brother there. These are amazing men, all men of faith, all involved in some type of ministry from this little village in Guma, which is a Christian village, and famous for some of these, in the region, for some of these people who have gone out and ministered through the land. Let me come to the Leper Colony. I remember on the first trip when I went there, I was so taken back, and I found myself just trying to hold it together the whole time I was walking around. You can't believe the conditions these precious people have to live in. But again, we raise money for each trip as we're selling things on the table, for example, and we take money over. We're full of tuk-tuk with supplies, and we go to the home. This was the Leper Colony that we went to. Such precious people. I think there was about 25 at the time when we went, and about half of them were Christians. Many of them become Christians through the visits. David visits there regularly. And really what they need is just God's love to be accepted, to hear the wonderful joys of the gospel. Of course they have their practical physical needs, which we endeavor to meet. But every time I've gone, when they share their testimony, they have said it again and again. They say, listen, thank you for the food and these supplies, and it's needed, and we're so thankful. But what we are most thankful for is that you have brought the gospel, and that when you come, you express the love of God. They say our own families have forsaken us. No one visits us, but you come and you hug us. And Richard didn't mention this, but when they correct me if I'm wrong in this, but on one of the first trips, I think it was Richard who asked the question: how there is a cure for leprosy? Could we get the cure so that they don't have this disease that's contagious anymore? And I think it was through the World Health Organization or someone. We managed to get the medicine to cure them from the leprosy, so they're not contagious. They don't have leprosy active now, but they still have the effect of it, so that many of them are missing fingers and etc. But even so, the community has completely forsaken them. No one will go anywhere near that compound. And when we go, people are looking at us, you're going in there, and it's such a joy to do so. And these precious people are so thankful when we get to go. And they will share their stories and their testimonies. And it's quite humbling in such conditions to hear their thankfulness and how God has met their lives, and it's really something. And we would always get up and give our love from the church and share a word with them. This precious girl, her name is Svati, her story is that she was abandoned as a baby girl in the field next to the hospital, because typically when they would have, if they don't have a boy, which is what most families want, if they have a girl, they often will just want to get rid of them, and leaving them to perish in the field is often the answer. And this lady, who is from the Leper Colony, is the one who found the baby. And when she went to try and give the baby to someone, they said, "Oh, we don't want her now," because this lady was from the Leper Colony. So this girl has grown up her whole life on the Leper Colony, although she's never had leprosy. And she's, I think, 17 or 18 in this picture. The most beautiful, pure-hearted girl. Unbelievable story. And we're just thankful that ministry continues as it does today. That's a great picture of the group that meets with us. And again, this picture was just sent over just a couple of days ago. "You are our love, joy, and smile," were the words they often obviously chose to send that message to us today. We're thankful that Lisa Tong, where is she? Lisa, you can come on up. She has put together, raised an awareness and a support group, particularly for the Leper Colony. And she's going to come up and say a few words about that. So there's a microphone right there.
Thanks.
That one right there.
You know,
Sorry. That one.
Okay, a shorter one for me. I'd like to start really quickly with taking a picture of all of you, because we meet regularly with the group of Leprosy every month on Skype. And they would really love to see all of your faces, because we always see them, but they never see us, you see. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a really quick picture of the church, and if you could wave.
Actually, for the children and David, they would all love to see that, yeah.
Yeah, we will show them. So, okay, big wave. So I'll show that to them this coming Sunday, maybe when we meet with them.
Turn the mic on or not?
Is it on? Oh.
It's on.
Okay, that's on. So, I was really inspired by David when he came to visit the church back in, I think, 2008 or so. And it just so happened that I was on a work trip with a charity I used to work with. And I was in India, and I decided, well, I'll pop down and go and visit David and see the children as well. And I was really lucky that he then introduced me to this group of people with leprosy. And, as Graham and others have said, it really is quite a dire situation for them. So that was 10 years ago. That was in 2010, more than 10 years ago when I first met them. I'm not going to talk about all the sort of years in between, but fast forward 10 years, and we all found ourselves in lockdown. We were coming, COVID was hitting everyone really. And I got contacted by David. He was saying, look, our people with leprosy are in real sort of a desperate need, because they're in lockdown. No one is providing food for them, because sometimes they would be able to go and beg and get their sort of daily food, or sometimes people would drop food for them. So they were literally kind of starving, unable to leave their compound, and no one was feeding them. So he said, look, is there something that you can do? So I and a few friends, and Dietz is over there, one of my friends who's part of the group as well, we decided, we're all in lockdown. Why don't we try and do a little bit of fundraising, try and get together and see what we can do? So it's a sort of a New Haven, Peacehaven, Brighton community meets a Paraleka Mundi community. All of us in the same situation. We can't go out. We're all facing COVID. And we started that way. So we raised a little bit of funds and started sending them out sort of money for the basics, just food, a bit of medication that they needed every month. And we started to communicate with David via Skype. So as I said, every month we have a catch-up call with David and the people of Leprosy. So anyone that wants to join that, you're most welcome. We'd love, to link you in as well, so you can see where they live, have a chat with them as well, and get to know them a bit. It's really lovely. So in the past 2 years, what we've done is we've steadily done little fundraising events and things like that. It's nothing huge, but just small amounts all the time. And they told us what they needed. First and foremost is food and water. So we got them some fresh water supply, clean water. We got them electricity for their toilet facilities. We got them sort of clothing and things like that. But the other sorts of things we did for them were they wanted to see the sea, so we did a sort of fundraiser for them to go out on a trip to the sea. And then we also tried to get them vaccinations for COVID. Now, sad to report that we were a little bit late in that. We did lose one of our members from COVID because they were so reluctant to get the vaccine. And then when several of them came down with COVID, already it was a bit late for one of them because he was quite poorly. He passed away, but the others recovered, and then they got the vaccine after that. So they feel like there's some element of sort of protection against COVID for them at least. But they really are a joy. Every month when we meet with them, they're thankful. They sort of always remember the church, and they always remember Jeff and Graham and Ian's visits, and they say, please come and see us. We don't want the money, we want to see you. So that's their message. They want to connect on a personal level with us. We're very blessed because we've had support from friends and so on, and we are able to give a monthly donation to them. That's them at the sea for the first time. And recently we started a mini goat project with them, so we managed to buy some goats for them, so they'll hopefully be able to breed from them and maybe use their milk and that sort of thing. But yeah, anyone that's interested to continue finding out a bit more, I'd be happy to let you know more about that.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, wrong one. That girl, did you mention the goats? The goats, yeah, they've managed to get goats, getting a herd of goats now. And the last part of the work, we have the children's home, we have the lepers ministry, and the last part is what we call Open Ministries, an acronym that Jeff coined for Odisha Peace Haven Evangelical Network. And this is, of course, through David and the team. They either walk or they, by motorbikes, they go up into these mountain villages and they preach the gospel, they teach the Bible, they start churches. And to date, actually at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 13 churches. Now we have 18 churches. 5 of them are in Christian villages, although they still get some opposition and persecution. All of the others are in Hindu villages where they face it all the time. During their services, people throwing rocks on the tin roof, pulling the church down. They're not allowed the freedoms that the others have in the village and things like that. We heard recently of one story of in one Hindu village, 57 people, it was 7 families, Christian families, were forced out of the village, and we raised support for them because effectively the end result was you have to start again, build a little village in the forest, you're on your own, little kids and everything, because they were Christians. And we're continuing to support them through Voice of the Martyrs, which is an organization our church is now connected with in Poland and Korea. We've raised lots of money for that need. But anyway, so Open Ministries. This goes up into the mountains. These are the men, pastors and their assistants of these churches. The first trip I was there, it became so apparent to me that these precious men, they're so humble, they're so thankful, they love God. Many of them are facing persecution for their ministry, but they've had so little teaching. In fact, this past year, through Voice of the Martyrs, we were able to raise money to send these 18 pastors to Bible college for 6 months, which was amazing to give them a foundation. But they really need, to grow in the awareness of grace and the gospel and their position in Christ and these types of things, and going through Bible books. So while we were there, we had an all-day seminar I did with them on Saturday. We just talked about principles we went through the book of Galatians somewhat, salvation by grace, eternal security, etc. They are drinking it in. And we're talking for hours, and they just say, can we do one more? It's unbelievable. And they would sing. There they are with percussion instruments and singing. This guy particularly loved to get up and lead a song. It went something like this. Anyway, such precious men. Some of them traveled hours and hours just to come and be together for that day for the conference. Amazing. So going up into the Sahara Hills and the 4x4, these are the kind of roads that we might encounter. That was Jeff and Richard getting stuck on one trip. That's the kind of thing that might happen. And these are the types of villages and places that you would end up going. And again, some of these are 3 hours driving up these roads into the remotest place you could imagine. Again, many of them have not seen a foreigner before, and it's quite an experience. This was in one of our churches in Balancing. We have it's a Christian village, and we have a Christian church there. So we have the liberty there to meet, and they have a great facility built by the Canadian Baptists 100 years ago. They have a great church facility, and our 18 churches, we meet together and we have a conference. And again, some of these are walking in for hours just to meet with us. And Jeff and Richard didn't quite tell me what was happening the first time I went. We got out of our vehicle and we start coming down the road. We're parading down the street, and there's a band that comes out. They're playing this music, and it took me a while to realize what was happening. But they were ushering us into the village as their guests. And as we're going down the street, the people are coming out of their houses and joining the procession and leading us into the main square in front of the church. And when we got there, they had a ceremony of washing our feet and the garlands and honoring us and singing. It was unbelievable. It was the most incredible experience. And then we go into the building. Look at those bright colors. Amazing, isn't it? And we would preach and teach. There were 2 translations going on there. Neither of them were Hindi, but local dialects. David's brother HK speaks, I think it's 7 languages, isn't it? Or more, maybe, I don't know. He speaks so many of these languages. We go up to these remote, and I said, what are you speaking? And he'll name another dialect we've never heard of, and he was our translator. So there's 2 translations. You have to choose your words very carefully. And they would listen, and they would love that time. The men on one side, the ladies on the other, and of course, again, they would love to sing. And then Ian would get up, give a greeting from the church, say a few words, encourage them. And then there we're having a prayer with the pastors of the churches, and afterwards we would have a prayer with whoever would want a prayer. Let's just say we were there for some time, just praying for the needs of these precious people would come up, and one by one families would come up and ask for prayer, and we would pray with them. This is another version of the gospel bracelet that we would do in these meetings. There they're cooking up rice for the food. They would all eat in the square. The family eating there. There they are cleaning afterwards with such joy and again thankfulness. I love this picture. It captures the elderly wisdom of the village and the next generation following right here. And then the next generation after that. And then we went up to HK told us about, there was a conference happening in a place called Puta. Jeff stayed down with the children for the day. Ian and I ventured up with HK, really not knowing what to expect. We were it was again about 2.5 hours plus to drive up there in the 4x4. And these are rice fields, paddy fields, stepped into the mountains. Many of the villages, their livelihood is in growing rice, selling rice. And you would have these spectacular views across the valley, incredible. And every now and then there would be this little village that would be nestled into the hills. So we went up there not knowing what to expect. HK said there's going to be quite a gathering up here, and the next thing we walked down into the village, and there's about 1,500 people waiting for us. And we were quite, taken back by that. The women on one side, the men on the other side, and we began to teach and preach. And I remember these times we finish and we say, HK, what do you want to do now? And he'd lean over and say, can you preach again? And we would just preach another message. We could just on and on. And behind us, again, there are the other pastors and leaders and their wives. Such precious, humble people, thankful people. And then this is the last one. This was a trip. We went up to a tribal village with HK on a Sunday morning, just he and I. And this is the type of road we had to try and drive down, almost impassable. We managed it in the end. We come down into this little village, again, a Canadian Baptist church built. It's the nicest, most prominent building in the village, surrounded by these rice fields. That's the main street. And these are the people gathered with us. We had a meeting with them. What struck me about this is after the meeting, the leader, and when we went up there, HK said, these people would have never met a foreigner before, for sure. I can tell you that. They'd never seen a white face before. We went up there and we just had this incredible connection. And we taught a grace message. And afterwards, the leaders came down and they said, no one ever told us that salvation is free before. And that just hit me so hard, just the immense need for teaching of the grace of God in these regions, which is why we do the meetings. Now we ensure that whenever we teach, it's recorded because they can pass it around on their phones. And then after our day trips to the villages, we would always come back to the home of life exhausted, but so thankful for what God had done. And greeted by the children. On the last night, they would always do a dance for us, the girls and the boys. They would share testimonies that would reduce you to tears of their thankfulness. I remember so many memories and images I've got, but I remember when we would leave in the van like this, they would run along the side of they wouldn't want to let go of your hand. And they would say, please come again, please come back, please promise you'll come back. It's such a privilege to go. And it was such a privilege to go on that trip, and by God's grace, we hope we can get to go perhaps next year. I'm going to ask Ian to come up, and he's going to give a reflection, a few impressions on his trip, and then he's going to lead us in a closing prayer. If any of you would be interested in supporting the work in any measure, of course, by your prayers, if you'd like to give, we do have a support a child thing that you can look at. £25 a month roughly supports a child for all their needs in the home. It doesn't have, that just puts a figure on it. It could be £5 a month, £3, but it doesn't matter. We can tell you with great joy that we know that every single penny hits the ground and is put to work in that home. There is also other opportunities of giving on the website, etc. So over to Ian. He's going to say a few words and then close us in a prayer. Thank you.
Okay. Right, is this on? Yep, good. Basically, you'll know that this is going to be brief, so you'll be pleased to hear that one. I was asked just to give a few impressions because I'm came a little bit late to this India party. I've been just the once in 2020, and really it was just to give you an overall impression of what it's like to go there as somebody who's hadn't been to India before. And most of you probably don't know that for about 40 odd years, I was an environmental health officer. And my whole profession, my working life, was about hygiene, sanitation, clean air, good food. And I got off the plane at Delhi and I thought, where's all this clean air? It was just like this smog. And it just sort of, in hygiene terms, just went downhill from there. The further we got out into the remote bits, hygiene just went. And you've seen some of the photos there. There were pigs, there were dogs, there was cattle, there was sewage. It was, in terms of hygiene, wow. So I thought, what have I let myself in for here? God, please help me through this. And then once you sort of get out of your Western mindset and just, right, that's what we're into, let's start looking at what we're actually landed into here. Let's start with, it's a beautiful country. Absolutely stunning.
करूंगी सदा तुझ पे विश्वास मैं करूंगी सदा तुझ पे विश्वास.
With all those paddy fields and the hills and the trees and the sunlight, and it was just wonderful. But that's not what we were there. We weren't tourists. We weren't there looking for the sanitation or the beauty. It's all about the people. And did you notice in those photos how many people were smiling? Smiling, smiling, smiling people. They've got nothing, but they smile. And there are three things. You've gone through those sort of aspects, starting off with the home of life. I won't go into more details of that. But again, we rocked up there. We were dead tired because we've been travelling a long way, etc., etc. And we've been driving up from the airport, I don't know, about 5 or 6 hours on this horrendous Indian road with, again, another nightmare, another thing. Sort of, I was doing safety as part of my job. Whoa, Indian roads, not safe. But we got to the home of life, and the faces of these children just coming to greet you, it was just overwhelming. They had hope, they had joy, it was just stunning. And you know what was really inspiring? It was obviously the children. You've heard how it's all sort of come together through God's providence. But it was the faith and the inspiration of the leaders there, the Lima brothers, the helpers. They were given their lives to helping these kids. And it was really, really inspiring and heart-touching, heart-wrenching. I'll move on quickly. You've already heard about the Leper Colony. Wow, that really hits there. And the reason it hits there is, again, you've heard all about the whys and the wherefores, etc., etc., but just the sheer joy of the people to see that somebody was taking an interest in them. And that somebody was taking an interest in them, not because it was just a nice thing to do, but you were there with your Christian love and sharing the Christian love. And there was one lady, I remember, she was so proud of her house. We wouldn't call it a house. She wanted to show me into this house, and she wanted to show me, she's got pictures of Jesus on the wall, and, you know, I'm a Christian, etc., etc. And she was so pleased to just welcome a foreigner into our house, another Christian into our house. And there were rats running around in it. But it didn't matter to her. She was just so pleased. And that was so touching. You told about the conferences. And again, Graham just mentioned it, about we entered this place and there was about 1,500 people in this whacking great tent. And what really struck me, this was in the middle of nowhere. Couldn't have been any... And there's all these people. It was like, you know, you've seen these Cecil B. DeMille films where all the people are coming down from the hills and, you know, the whole Hollywood Old Testament movies, etc., etc. And this was happening in real life. There's all these people wandering down. They'd been walking for hours, in some cases days, to get to this conference. And the sheer faith of all those people to gather there, to hear the word, Again, just inspiring. So, again, I promised you I'd be brief, and I'll leave it at that. But just know that those people in those places are our brothers and our sisters in Christ. And it's not a question of giving anything to them, because they give back to you. It's just a question of a whole Christian family sharing what we have with one another. They're sharing their faith, we're sharing our faith, they're sharing love, we're sharing love. And it's so, so, so moving. So again, just coming back to Jeff and Richard, you know, and God's providence, all those years bringing David here, Jeff, Richard going there, and it's just started something that's really, really powerful. I just wanted just a couple of words just sprang to mind, and it was summary. There's squalor, there is need, there's persecution, there are all sorts of issues that there are needs out there. But there's also love, joy, service, faith, hope, and most of all, Christianity is alive and well in those places in Odisha. And that, thank God for that.